retailers, apparel makers, casinos. I mean, that's sort of the lineup. The only one that really stands out that isn't quite at the top, but certainly has some pretty substantial gains, medical testing companies. Laboratory Corp of America, LabCorp, and also Quest Diagnostics are each up at least 7.5%. Citigroup turning more positive on the industry. I mean, given the need for COVID-19 tests, for one thing.
Right.
So,
think about how much we've heard about testing and tracing, right? That is going to be key in terms of reopening the economy. It's going to become a way of life until we get a vaccine. So that makes a lot of sense. Elena Popina, come on in on our conversation. You've got a story out, really a good read. Mom and Pop were all over the market during the March rout. Mom and Pop have been on the sidelines, I felt like, through much of the run-up in stocks. Tell us what we found out and what we saw.
Well, that's very interesting statistics from major brokerages that report new accounts that what we heard from E-Trade, TD Ameritrade, and Schwab was that during the first quarter, the number of new accounts that people opened and put their money in rose by the most on record for all three major brokerages. And the biggest part of that advance was in March. It wasn't during January. It wasn't in the first half of February when the market gained to its new all-time high on February 19th. It was in March, which tells us that mom and pop investors, retail investors, non-professionals, they tried to take advantage of the market volatility. You know, for the brave of heart, those who could, were brave enough to withstand all those absolutely crazy price fluctuations. Right. That was something. That was quite something. And I don't know if we're going to see that ever again in the lifetime. Those brokerages kept saying in their reports that these numbers were absolutely crazy. They've never seen anything like this.
Well, that word unprecedented gets thrown around a lot because it's true. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Elena Popina, equity markets reporter for Bloomberg. Dave Wilson, stocks editor. You'll be back with us in just a bit with your chart and stock of the day. We need to go to Virginia now. Governor Ralph Northam giving an update.
In public housing neighborhoods in Richmond. That's part of a pilot project we're doing with local health departments to ensure that people who are vulnerable, such as economically disadvantaged populations, are able to access tests. As part of this project, we're also providing PPE and information about accessing health care. On Wednesday, I've asked Dr. Karen Remley to give you a more comprehensive testing update, but I will, before Wednesday, tell you that I'm just so pleased that she was able to join our team, and as you've heard, our testing per day has almost doubled within the last week, and so I thank her and her team. Now I'd like to talk about our rising concerns for spread in our meat processing plants. Our teams across Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, and the CDC worked throughout this weekend on this. Here's where we are. Virginia has 10 poultry processing facilities, primarily in the Shenandoah Valley and the Eastern Shore, which is where my home is. Last week, data in the Eastern Shore Health District began to show a rising number of COVID cases among workers at poultry processing facilities in Accomack County. Similar facilities across the Delmarva Peninsula, including Maryland and Delaware, are seeing a similar rise in sick workers. These poultry plants are a vital part of our food supply chain, providing food to millions of people on the East Coast. But the health of the people who work in these plants is also critically important. While the companies here in Virginia are taking additional safety measures inside their facilities to protect their workers and keep the plants operational, I am very concerned about the continued rise in cases. I grew up on the Eastern Shore, and I know it very well. It's a rural area with excellent access to health care, but I know how quickly our medical resources there could be overwhelmed with a surge in cases. The workers in poultry plants are particularly vulnerable. About 3,000 people work in 2 plants on Virginia's Eastern Shore. Many of them do not speak English as their first language, and the close quarters of their housing makes measures such as isolation and quarantine even more difficult. Friday evening, I joined Governor Hogan of Maryland and Governor Carney of Delaware in writing a letter to our president. We're asking the federal government for assistance and for a fully coordinated approach in dealing with this rapidly evolving situation. Because the poultry economy on the Delmarva Peninsula is so interconnected, a coordinated approach is critical. My team worked over the weekend with our partners in these other states and with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC has committed to deploying teams on the ground in all 3 states, and we expect a team to be in Virginia today. This team includes epidemiologists and contact tracers, as well as language specialists who speak Haitian Creole, the language spoken by many workers in the Delmarva plants. The CDC team will work with our local health department and VDH. We expect the CDC team to do an overall assessment of the situation and help with wider scale testing to determine the actual scope of the problem. That will allow us to take the most appropriate mitigation steps to contain the outbreak on Virginia's Eastern Shore. These requests are generating results. Yesterday, the CDC released new guidance for meat processing facilities, several of which have begun seeing large-scale outbreaks across the entire nation. Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry, Bettina Ring, and Deputy Secretary of Health and Human Resources, Gina Berger, are leading our efforts. We spoke yesterday with corporate leadership from both poultry companies with operations on the shore, and I'd like to thank them for their willingness to cooperate with us and to share needed information. While the situation on Virginia's Eastern Shore is our immediate concern, we are also following developments at the smaller poultry facilities in the Shenandoah Valley as well. Virginia has more than 120 federally inspected meat processing facilities. Our local health departments have been on the ground working with facilities to track cases, increase safety procedures, and recommending mitigation measures. We will ensure that workers are screened, provided care if they are sick, and measures are taken to protect other workers not showing symptoms. Now I would like to talk briefly about vaccinations. We all have heard about global efforts to find a vaccine for COVID-19. A vaccine would mean we could resume our lives, our economies, and our society. It's important to remember how many epidemics we have avoided by having vaccines for other diseases that once killed people, like polio, measles, or tetanus. Today is the start of National Infant Vaccination Week, and I want to take this opportunity to strongly urge parents to keep up their children's vaccination schedule. It's essential to vaccinate young children on time to provide immunity before children may be exposed to potentially life-threatening diseases. Fortunately, most Virginia children are vaccinated on time. However, due to COVID-19, we're starting to see a decline in immunizations. Parents are opting not to take their children to the pediatrician for their vaccines. As a pediatrician, this is very concerning. Vaccinations are a critical protection for children and communities. We don't want to see an outbreak of a preventable disease such as measles on top of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know that healthcare providers around the state are working hard to make sure that children still receive the well visits and immunizations they need. Some pediatricians are scheduling well visits at different times or different locations than sick visits. So please, parents, call your pediatrician or your family practice providers and make sure that your child is getting his or her vaccinations on schedule. While we focus on Virginia's physical health during this epidemic, we know that this has taken a toll.
And you've been listening to Virginia Governor Ralph Northam give an update. And, you know, in the latter part of that conversation, Carol talking a lot about vaccinations, which we've talked about in light of the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak, but noting, and this is something that will lead right into our next conversation, that all areas of healthcare are being affected by this, and even more run-of-the-mill vaccinations that many parents take their kids to the pediatrician for. You and I are familiar with that. Not getting done owing to everything that's going on in the world.
Well, and this is why we've had those conversations. And let's get into it about maybe at some point we're going to have health facilities, hospitals that are COVID-19 hospitals or facilities, and those that aren't, so that people feel comfortable going in for routine visits and updates. Let's bring in Dr. Sandro Galea, Dean of the Boston University School of Public Health. His book is Pained, Uncomfortable Conversations About the Public's Health, which, as Jason and I talked about earlier, is so timely considering some of the things that are being revealed, or once again reminded and revealed in terms of some of the weak points in our society. He's on the phone from Boston. Dr. Galea, nice to have you back with us. You know, it's been a few weeks since we've talked with you. You know, what are your thoughts about where we are, how we're handling it, and what we still need to do, especially for the less fortunate and the more vulnerable populations of our society?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here. I think as the pandemic proceeds, we are seeing more and more how this exposes fractures in our society. When the pandemic first started, there were a lot of conversation about how the virus does not discriminate, it affects everybody. But it didn't take long for us to realize that the virus does discriminate, that yes, we are all at risk of the virus, but ultimately those who are more at risk are those who are marginalized, who are poor, who are people of color, who live alone, who are single parents, and those who die are those same groups. So what we're seeing is a world where groups that are vulnerable do not even have protections from something as widespread as a pandemic like this. And you're hearing this from data emerging from cities all over the country and really from all over the world. So I certainly hope that this is a wake-up call for us that says, even in the context of a pandemic, we have created conditions where health haves and health have-nots deviate at a time like this.
And Dr. Galea, how did we get here? I mean, how did it get this bad? And was this something that always existed? It feels like it's been exacerbated in the last, call it 10, 20 years.
Yeah, well, when you look at the data, it has been exacerbated probably in the last 30 to 40 years.
Okay.
So about 40 years ago, this is important to note, the American health was among the best of the high-income world. Now, today, we are squarely the worst. We have squarely the worst health of any of our high-income country peers. So we have life expectancy is shorter. We have higher deaths from infectious disease, higher deaths from non-communicable disease, and we leave about 5 years of life expectancy on the table compared to other countries. So, I would ask you and ask anybody listening. We have chosen to leave 5 years behind in life expectancy. And now you may be saying, well, I didn't choose that, but we did. You did and I did, because we have voted for policies that allow that to happen. So it's been about the past 30 to 40 years where our health as a country has been getting progressively worse. And it has brought us to a place where when something like this happens, it reveals this underlying truth. Now, this truth is with us at all times. The virus did not create it. The virus is just exposing it.
And what specifically the policies and maybe the ones that could more easily than others be reversed, what would you point to?
Well, I think we need to really look at this from top to bottom. We would start with the fact that we have a system which ultimately accumulates resources and rewards those who have resources. That starts from our taxation policies all the way to our employment policies, all the way to who gets sick leave, who doesn't, from the state of our education, from the state of our housing. If we really wanted to tackle this, we would say, how do we create a world where everybody has access to high-quality education to allow us to change people's life trajectories, that everybody has access to stable housing, where we have a fair economy such that people who work hard can get jobs that puts them on the right track. And all of that ultimately would add up to creating much better life trajectories for people.
That is so true, because if you think about it, if you get a good education, you'll probably get a good job that also provides you with great benefits or good benefits in terms of health care and other.
Or some benefits.
Or some benefits, right? But we know what amazes me, and Jason and I hosted a quality summit that we did here at Bloomberg, and we were talking about, how this virus is impacting the more vulnerable populations. As you said, healthcare, the problems have been exacerbated. I thought you said 45 to 50 years. It's a long time. Why haven't we been able to figure this out? We have some of the best and brightest minds in this nation, public sector, private sector. We know the problems are there. They've been there for a long time. What's holding us back? Is it private sector? Is it public sector? Where's the problem?
Well, it's a terrific question. I would point to all of us. I think we are holding ourselves back, frankly, because those of us who are in the richest 20%, and that means me, that means you, have been too self-involved. And frankly, the system serves us too well. There really is little incentive to push against the system that ultimately serves those who are dominating the cultural business conversation. And that is all of us. So we need to say, this is a moment in time which has exposed these underlying inequities and which shows us that there is a country of health haves, which is roughly the richest 20%, and health have-nots, which is roughly the poorest 80%, and say that is not the kind of country we want to live in. Now, we do not want to live in that kind of country because that is wrong, and secondly, because if there is another outbreak like this, it threatens us all. So we're beginning to see with this outbreak that if some of us are vulnerable, all of us are vulnerable. And if this is not a wake-up call, a moment in time, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I kind of give up on humanity if it's not.
Yeah.
Truth be told.
Well, let's be optimistic. Let's say that we all see this as a turning point that it should be.
Right. And so, Dr. Galea, let's continue to look through the lens, if we can, of this specific outbreak, and I believe we've talked with you about this a little bit before. I mean, the numbers in the hospitals, so the number of admittances, certainly the number of deaths, certainly skew much more toward more vulnerable populations as we are at this critical point. And every point seems like a critical point these days, but as we're at this point where we think about reopening and the dangers of a second wave, how do we best protect those who are most vulnerable given the system that we have now?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think the way to address that is by sort of breaking the problem apart into its constituent parts. So number one is who gets the virus, right? So we are seeing that minorities, people who are marginalized, are more likely to get infected. Now, why is that? Well, that's simply a function of the fact that it's harder to physically or socially distance if you have to go to work, if you have to ride public transit. All of those are factors that put you in contact with the virus, make you more likely to get it. So it's step one. Now, once you have the virus, the people, again, who are in marginalized groups, disadvantaged groups, are more likely to die. That is probably a reflection of the fact of greater underlying health conditions, right, greater morbidity underlying. So when you understand that, then the question becomes, how do we deal with those two aspects? Well, I think on the first aspect, we need to make sure as reopening happens that we have a clear risk stratification, that people who are most at risk are most protected. Now, what does that mean? That means saying that if we are doing physical spacing, diffusing physical density, that we particularly respect people who are at higher risk because they have underlying conditions, and that we make sure that we put in place opportunities for people who otherwise would be brought face-to-face with greater risk of transmission to work from home or not to be at work and still get paid for it. Now, all of this is hard, but they represent fundamental changes in employment that we should be making anyway. And we should be using this as a moment to hold ourselves up to a mirror and say, how should we be structuring employment so that it's fair, reasonable, and sustainable for all of us?
When it comes to, as you said, we need to think about destratification, risk destratification, those most at risk. Is this going to become part of our normal society? Are we going to be constantly faced with these types of viruses, Dr. Galea?
It's very hard to say, right? These viruses, in some respects, are not new. What has been new about this one is that it has spread quickly, and also that we were aware of it. When you look back to, say, the Hong Kong flu, which was about 50 years ago, it was very similar to this one, and it killed more people than COVID is going to kill. That was 50 years ago, let alone, of course, the great Spanish flu, which was 100 years ago. So it's a question of, to some extent, there's randomness and there's luck in it as to whether or not there will be another virus like this 2 years from now, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. But the fundamental approach we should take is to say, what should we be doing to mitigate it if there is and when there is another virus? And we should be doing two things, right? Number one is we should make sure that we have public health infrastructure that allows us to rapidly test, contact trace, screen, treat, isolate as needed to contain the spread. This is number one. Number two is we should be paying attention to these issues we're talking about on this call, which is paying attention to the fact to make sure that we do not have an unhealthy population to begin with, making sure that we do not have a large proportion of people in the population who are essentially sitting ducks for getting really sick when a virus hits and becoming a reservoir of disease for all of us. That's what we should be doing.
All right. We're going to continue this conversation. This is fascinating, and we're going to talk a lot more about that sort of health on the front end when we come back with Dr. Sandro Galea. He is the Dean of the Boston University School of Public Health, also the author of the new book, Pained Uncomfortable Conversations about the Public's Health. Stick with us. More to come.
Yeah, one of our loyal listeners saying, love this guest.
He's great. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Optimism that there's light at the end of the coronavirus tunnel is pushing stocks higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 303, the S&P 500 up 37, the Nasdaq Composite is up 85. The chairman of Tyson Foods warns that the food supply chain is breaking. John Tyson says millions of pounds of meat will be lost as COVID-19 closes more U.S. meat processing plants. Farmers will have no choice but to kill excess livestock. Homeowners skipping mortgage payments due to COVID-19 hardships won't have to make them up all at once when forbearance ends. That's true for loans backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Their regulator says other lenders should do likewise. In a crucial test for its drone delivery service, UPS will use the small lightweight aircraft to fill prescriptions for residents at one of Florida's biggest retirement communities. Deliveries will be made from a CVS store about half a mile away. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. In-depth analysis.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Fraudsters are getting more and more sophisticated, and it's easier than ever for people to make an honest mistake and lose their money. TSB doesn't think anyone should have to pay for being an innocent victim of fraud on their account. That's why they've created the TSB Fraud Refund Guarantee. To find out more, visit tsb.co.uk. Terms and conditions apply.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Another day inside? I've turned my place into a gymnasium. I'm using the stairs for lunging and the washing machine as a power plate. But if you'd rather shed pounds off your outgoings, take a few minutes to check your bank account for any unwanted direct debits. It's just another small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Well, coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Dr. Sandro Galea up at BU. He's got a new book out. We're going to talk a lot about the state of public health, Carol.
Yeah, and I'm curious what he thinks about the role of technology, because we're seeing tech firms step up big time in this crisis. All right, let's get back to your top business stories and a check on that trading day. Hey, Charlie Pellett.
Well, hello there. Happy Monday again to you both. We've got the Dow holding above 24,095 at or near best level of the day right now for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. The Dow up 321 points, up 1.4%. S&P up 38, up by 1.4%. NASDAQ up 84. That is a gain of 1%. The 10-year down 17/30 seconds, yield 0.65%. Stocks climbing alongside global counterparts as major economies edge higher and look toward reopening. Also, policymakers in Japan and Europe sought to reduce pressure on credit markets. France, meanwhile, is reporting the most new coronavirus cases in more than a week, while deaths linked to the virus rose for the first time in 5 days. President Trump will have more to say about reopening the U.S. and the economy in a news conference later this afternoon. We'll have that for you live here on Bloomberg Radio. Right now, that is scheduled for the 5 o'clock hour. Any changes, we'll let you know. One of the big unknowns, though, in the spread of the coronavirus is what the potential rate of reinfection might be. Dr. Joshua Sharfstein is Vice Dean at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
So I think the current reading is, like with most viral infections, there will be some degree of immunity, particularly for people who experience illness. How much and for how long is not known. And it's also not known which test will really capture that.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Boeing says 52% of shareholders at the company's annual meeting voted to require the company to appoint an independent chairman. In a virtual gathering, CEO David Calhoun also said it will be, quote, years before dividend payments resume. Boeing shares today, right now we do have Boeing up by 0.7%. UPS will be using drones to fill prescriptions savings for residents of the Villages in Florida, one of the country's biggest retirement communities, amid a lockdown to halt the coronavirus. The time or temperature-sensitive deliveries from a CVS store about a half-mile away are scheduled to begin next week. We've got shares of CVS. They're up now by 2.1%. UPS up by 2.7%. Again, recapping, equities higher across the board. Gold down 1%. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 23% now, $13.06 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Let's continue our conversation now with Dr. Sandro Galea. He's the dean of the Boston University School of Public Health, also the author of Pained Uncomfortable Conversations about the Public's Health. And Dr. Galea, I have to ask you, and Carol and I teased this just a minute or so ago. We have heard so much about telemedicine at this point. I was listening to a story on another radio station this morning talking about a huge increase even with GPs of essentially saying, look, you need a checkup, you need this, you need some advice. Let's do a consultation over a phone, an app, whatever it is. Is that the new normal? And does it actually work, I guess, is really my basic question.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's no reason to believe that a fair bit of telemedicine will not work. And medicine has been slow in adopting telemedicine approaches on things that you can imagine would work just fine using telemedicine. Now, there haven't been some systematic assessments of some of these approaches, and we have to be careful that we're not jumping wholesale to things that don't work. But the truth is that perhaps from a silver lining point of view, an event like this pushes us to embrace technologies whose time has come. From the point of view of, for example, things like telepsychiatry, telebehavioral health, teleregular checkups, these things you can imagine how they would work, and they would relieve the pressure of having to have physical contact and relieve some of the pressures on health systems. The other side of this is that one of the worries in a moment like this is that because the health system is all so consumed with COVID, or at least with worrying about COVID, is that we are not paying attention to other conditions that should be seen by the health system. So introducing telemedicine, introducing telehealth as a way of making sure that people still get their regular checkups, that people are still talking to physicians, particularly people are still tending to their mental health. This is a real important opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I do think, I wonder if this moment is really going to kind of get us over the hump of accepting telemedicine. I just think it's amazing. We're doing conferences on air. We're doing broadcasts on air, like so much. Right. And yes, it's not the same as being in a studio or next to your partner or your teams, but it's amazing how real it feels and is the next best thing. I think much better than we all anticipated. And hopefully that can apply to the medical community, where I know I work a lot. It's really hard to get to see my doctors, and I have to plan months in advance.
It's hard for you, and it's hard for me. And there have been many structural barriers to that. I think there's a psychological barrier that doctors who are not used to using telemedicine, but also, for example, payment schedules have not allowed it. Like the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services just introduced a whole range of billing codes now that are allowed for telebehavioral health, which before physicians would not get paid for doing telebehavioral health. So I think this moment is catalytic. It does allow the introduction of these approaches. But Carol, I think to your point, we should make sure that we recognize that these are never going to be complete substitutes for physical, for real personal interaction. I mean, they're complements, but they're not substitutes.
Well, and so having said that, and I was thinking about this when we first started talking, and Jason and I talked so much about wellness and this whole idea of, we really need to rethink, and I know we're pushing towards that, the medical community, to be about keeping you well. And I think if you're doing that, going to your doctor, staying well, that would be an also important thing to kind of move all of this forward.
It is, and I like the use of the word "well." Of course, I like it because the title of my previous book was called "Well," and but the reason I did that is because I do think that ultimately that is the definition of health we should be going for. It is for the complete absence of physical and mental disease, so that people can go on and do and achieve in their life what they want to achieve. Health should ultimately be a means, not an end. It's a means to people living their full lives and living towards fulfilling their aspirations. So what we really should be doing, to go back to our earlier conversation, is creating the kind of world that generates health, so that all of us on this call, everybody listening, can then get on with their lives and live their lives the way they want to.
Yeah, well, definitely words to live by for sure. And we, I think, are all thinking more and more about our wellness, our general health, and hopefully that will be one of the things that is a residual effect and catalytic, as you say, Dr. Galea, in terms of moving us forward. All right, Dr. Sandro Galea, great to have you back with us, the Dean of the Boston University School of Public Health, also the author of a new book, Pained, Uncomfortable Conversations About the Public's Health. I feel like we're having a lot of those these days. Maybe not uncomfortable, but certainly thoughtful. Yeah. And we certainly appreciate his time. It's a very, very busy time for anybody in the medical profession. We know that. Yeah, totally. And I love these big, broad conversations, too, about thinking, how can we do it better? And I think you're hearing a lot, especially from the private sector, the medical community, and I really do hope we continue those conversations and not only just talk, but actually make these changes. All right, let's get back to world and national news headlines. For that, we turn things over to Bob Moon. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Carol. Governors and mayors of both political parties say the next federal rescue package must include aid for states and cities or risk a prolonged recession, Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's suggestion that states should declare bankruptcy rather than be bailed out by Congress is rankling state leaders who point out Congress did not hesitate to provide relief to private businesses. Maryland's Republican Governor Larry Hogan, the head of the National Governors Association, on ABC's This Week, says McConnell may regret his remarks.
I think it just slipped out, but I'm hopeful that we will be able to convince Senator McConnell to go along with the bipartisan bill in the Senate.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is on board, but many Republican lawmakers are not, even as states lose billions in tax revenue. In Washington, Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
The picture is changing again at the nation's airports in a sign that more passengers are beginning to fly again. Some anxiety-inducing videos circulated over the weekend showing nearly full flights. In one case, a nervous traveler said it appeared American Airlines canceled at least one flight and added those people to another to intentionally fly more passengers on a single flight, which brings this new challenge. How do you stay away from people when you're stuffed into a plane with them? The airlines aren't being real specific with reassurances that they're keeping a close eye on seat assignments to keep them well separated and are giving people more leeway to move around. Still, not everyone appears to be satisfied with leaving their safety up to the carriers. Some passengers wore masks, some didn't, and not all the middle seats were empty. And at least two passengers in one video appeared to be wearing bulky hazmat-style suits. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
The world's financial decision-making.
This is a message from the government to all essential workers. You're doing vital jobs to keep our country going, and you can now get tested for coronavirus. From health professionals to emergency services. From delivery drivers to grocery workers. From teachers to care workers. Tests are available for you and anyone in your household who has symptoms. For a full list of all essential workers eligible and how to get a test, go to gov.uk/coronavirus.
At Tesco, we've price matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products in GB, Aldi stores and or online twice weekly. Price most often found is matched, excluding promotional prices. Products matched may vary by week. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Product availability varies by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. It's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks here today holding near their highs of the day as major economies edge toward reopening. Also, policymakers in Japan and Europe seek to reduce pressure on credit markets. S&P 500 index poised for a 6-week high as financial companies lead gains after a surprisingly good earnings report from Deutsche Bank. Shares of Deutsche Bank, the American depository receipts, they are advancing now by 12.4%. Other financials gaining as well. J.P. Morgan Chase up 4.3%. Citigroup up 7.7%. Bank of America up 5.2%. Wells Fargo up by 5.5%. 10-year yield 0.65%. Gold is down 1% right now, $17.11 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude plunged 23%, $13.03 a barrel. S&P up 42, up 1.5%. Again, the Dow close to the high of the day, up 350 now, up 1.5%. NASDAQ up 98. That is a gain of 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. And Carol Massar, one interesting thing I was just looking at, we're going to get a lot of tech earnings this week. Obviously, one of the biggest tech earnings weeks we've ever had. NASDAQ only down about 2.6% for the year.
Isn't that amazing?
Incredible.
Like, if you think about the swings that we've had, how quickly they've happened, that's just wild.
And speaking of a tech world, I learned a new term from this story that we're about to talk about. ACG.
You're so cool.
Did you see that?
No.
Anime,
of course I did.
Comics, and games. Did you know that? Did you know ACG?
I did not know that before I read this.
All right. Well,
so
Joel Weber knew it. Yeah, Joel Weber knew it. He's the editor of Bloomberg Business Week. He joins us on the phone from Brooklyn. And Molly Schutz, she is U.S. technology editor for Bloomberg. She edited this story, joining us on the phone from New York City. It's about a Chinese video site serving teens, but not just ACG, as they say, but there's another element to this. Joel, tell us about it.
Well, ACG kind of looks like the future to me, and it's definitely what the kids are into. And when we found out about this, Bilibili is the name of this Chinese site. The thing that really came across wasn't just like the ACG stuff, but it was the sort of the nationalism and maybe some propaganda that came along with it as well. Molly, what did we discover?
Right, we discovered that. So this is a site. This site Bilibili, like you said, has been around for about 10 years. And it attracts all the most popular demographic, the Gen Z demographic. And they're on there looking for the latest Japanese manga clips or maybe Grand Theft Auto. And now these days what we're seeing is that increasingly they're able to get a little bit of some Communist Youth League clips in there as well.
So tell us a little bit about, too, how people use it. I mean, this is a pretty active platform, right? So when somebody posts something, I mean, there's a lot of engagement.
Right. It's a platform, like we said, it started out mostly for ACG, and now it's morphed more to be like a YouTube site. They have a broad range of entertainment. It's news, it's entertainment, it's chatting. Young people go on there for what you would expect. They want to be entertained. They want to maybe find out about a little bit about what's going on. But for the most part, they haven't been on there, for school or for necessarily an education or hardcore news. But increasingly, that's, in a sneaky kind of way, it's how it's turning.
And go ahead.
Well, and I was going to say, it's very also political, and some of the things that it puts out there on the platform from different groups is pretty provocative.
Right. They're that one of the things that they had on there last year was a series depicting the life of German socialist philosopher Karl Marx. His theories are widely taught in Chinese schools. And so they put this clip on there. It was a clip produced exclusively for the platform by several state institutions, including the provincial propaganda department. And it shows a young Karl Marx dressed up or and portrayed as a typical Japanese manga-style protagonist. So this really gets kids where they're interested, which is in the manga, and then it's feeding them a little bit of the theories that they want to get across, the philosophies and the teachings that they want to get across. Another example, they had a show that depicted a little rabbit hunkering down. It was using cartoons and a cute little rabbit to depict, the political and events of war. So these are some of the kinds of ideas that they're putting in there in an animated way or in a storytelling way, but that are really sending a message.
So Molly, obviously a platform like this right now during the coronavirus pandemic is sort of, you've got captive audience to some extent. So what kind of revenue is this platform been seeing, and how is it faring of late?
Right there. So what they've found is that, it's good business, this propaganda. They recently had their earnings that they reported, and they reported just a little bit more than 2 billion yuan, or $282 million in revenue for their fourth quarter. That was up 74% from a year earlier, and most of that came from mobile game-related sales. So that came first, and then some live streaming and advertising. But most of these, you're really seeing that the more they engage people on the site, that it's bringing in the revenue. They had an example too of a New Year's Eve show that they live streamed, and that attracted huge audience and huge viewership. I think more than 80 million simultaneous viewers. They had an orchestra playing Harry Potter music, but also a chorus of soldiers singing patriotic themes about fighting off Japanese invaders during World War II.
So the platform that's coming to mind, Molly, when you kind of talk about this a little bit, but just obviously also captivated a ton of the youth is TikTok, right?
Yeah.
So how do these two platforms how do they compare from a user standpoint, then, but also B, from a monetization standpoint?
I think, from what I understand, I think TikTok is going to be a little bit more interactive. It's going to be, on TikTok you can go and you can make your own video. It's really creative. You can do short clips. You can do long clips with yourself or other people. You can use content that's out there, create your own. This site is more, it's less, I think, the way I understand it, about creating your own new content rather than consuming content that other people can post up there. So I think that's a little bit more the difference. This one they compare to a little bit more like a YouTube style channel, as opposed to a TikTok type channel.
With that side of propaganda, of course.
Right.
Yeah,
with the healthy side of propaganda. No, it's fascinating to think about. I mean, especially because we know that certain trends start to gain momentum. I mean, TikTok is a great example. Gain momentum in China, and then they make their way to the United States, and it all sort of builds from there.
And I think about it at a time where we really need global cooperation on something like this, just coming off the virus. We're going to need it economically, and yet I feel like we consistently have these platforms that just create disconnects and division, and I don't think that's a good thing.
All right. Our thanks to Molly Schutz, U.S. technology editor for Bloomberg News, joining us on the phone from New York City. And, of course, Joel Weber, the editor of Bloomberg Business Week, joining us on the phone from Brooklyn. Carol? All
right. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, and watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week with Jason and myself, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. And coming up next on Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to check in on the bond market and the economic news. Keep in mind, we've got a Fed meeting, right, Jason, coming our way on Wednesday. I am curious to see what happens in an environment where, rates are about as low as they can go, but certainly we can have negative rates. So we'll see where that goes, and also see what other kind of stimulus programs were needed. And then an interesting conversation with Andy Brown about Wuhan, which we know was the cover story of the magazine last week, but curious to see what Andy has to say.
Yeah, can't wait. He's right there on the front lines. Wuhan, it's on top of everybody's mind. This is Bloomberg.
That saying, success breeds...
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. S&P 500 index up now by 42 points, up 1.5%. The Dow also up by 1.5%, up 361 points now, holding above 24,000 at 24,136 again. Best level of the day, we've got NASDAQ up 98 for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain right now of just about 1.1%. So stocks are climbing as major economies edge toward reopening and policymakers in Japan and Europe seek to reduce pressure on credit markets. The dollar weakened, oil taking another dive this Monday. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 23%, down $3.92 a barrel, now at $13.01. As for the economic data and the market outlook, Laura Rame is chief economist at FS Investments.
This focus, I think, has been so extreme on the downside. Markets are actually looking ahead to what's coming in the reboot. And I just think that even though we're going to get this ghastly, really epically bad data this week, markets may ignore it and look ahead to what they see as a positive of getting back to work.
And right now we've got the 10-year down 17.30 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. Gold down 1%, 17.13 the ounce. General Motors has suspended its dividend and the share buyback program that activist investors fought for in the last half-decade, as the largest American automaker seeks to preserve cash in the midst of the pandemic, shutting down much of the global car industry. General Motors shares, they're up today by 1.6%. And Apple is reportedly pushing back the production ramp-up of 4 new iPhone models by about a month. This according to Dow Jones, citing sources. Apple shares today, right now we do have Apple lower by just about 0.1%. So again, recapping, equity markets higher across the board. NASDAQ up 99 points. That is a gain of 1.1%. S&P up 44, up 1.5%. Dow Jones Industrial Average now up by 373 points, up by 1.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Let's head out to California now. Governor Gavin Newsom giving an update.
However, that's driven by data. It's driven by behavior. And as we change our behavior, we can impact the science, the health, and the data. This virus doesn't take the weekends off. This virus doesn't go home because it's a beautiful sunny day around our coasts. The likelihood of having a virus-free world is not realistic in the next number of months. We'll look forward to that day as herd immunity comes into effect and we have a vaccine that we can distribute and make available to hundreds of millions of people across this country, billions around the rest of the globe. Until then, we have to manage it. We have to manage risks. We have to manage and augment our behavior. And that's why I cannot impress upon you more to those Californians watching that we can't see the images like we saw, particularly on Saturday in Newport Beach and elsewhere in the state of California. Look, I'm not naive. The overwhelming majority of our coastline was appropriately advanced, meaning the stay-at-home orders were advanced, the physical distancing, the social distancing on those beaches was appropriate. You didn't see those images in L.A. beaches and San Diego beaches and Northern California around San Mateo County, up further north towards Eureka, because we had strong guidelines that were not only adopted, but were abided by. And we had local partners that supported those efforts and helped create the conditions on those hard park closures that allowed people to continue to conduct themselves appropriately. Unfortunately, there were these exceptions on Saturday in particular, a little less so on Sunday, and we've got to confront that. And I'm encouraged. I want to acknowledge that Newport Beach. I want to acknowledge their city council. I want to acknowledge the County Board of Supervisors in Orange County. I'm told they are looking to consider some augmentations and some more deliberative engagement to address the conditions and those concerns that were highlighted over the course of the weekend. But I want folks to know this as well. We're doing the same at the state level. The California Highway Patrol with our State Parks Patrol with other partners, and we will avail ourselves to more aggressive enforcement of the stay-at-home order, of the social distancing, of the guidelines and procedures that we expect to be followed all across the state of California. I deeply respect localism. I deeply respect local decision-making. I deeply respect the work that elected officials do all up and down this state of all political stripes. And I recognize your anxiety, and I recognize the pressures. As a former county supervisor, as a former mayor, I understand those local pressures intimately. And I deeply understand the broader public sentiment about their need to get some clarity, get some confidence that we'll go back to whatever modified sense of normalcy that we hope to see, that we'll see that advanced sooner than later. But I cannot impress upon people more. The only thing that will set us back is our behavior. The only thing that will set us back is people stopping to practice physical distancing and appropriate social distancing. That's the only thing that's going to slow down our ability to reopen this economy, our ability to adapt and modify this stay-at-home order. As I said, weeks, not months. If the data continues to be as stable as it has been over the course of the last few weeks, the only thing that can stop that is more images, again, like we saw over this weekend. So I'm looking forward to working with those local government agencies, working much more aggressively on the enforcement side, and continue to believe that we have remarkable capacity in the state to stabilize this curve and make the kind of modifications that all of us are eager to make. Again, none more eager than I am. And I just want to extend to that point. Tomorrow, we will be laying out more detail. Last week, on Wednesday, we laid out details on one of our 6 indicators. That was on the issues of testing, on tracing, on tracking, on social isolation that is done with an economic justice framework and the issues around quarantine. Tomorrow, we're going to break down the number 5 indicator, which goes to our business environment, goes to schools and child care facilities and the like. And again, the hope and expectation is that we'll be in a position in a number of weeks to make meaningful modifications. But again, the data will guide that. The indicators will guide that. And the only thing that can disrupt that, to set us back, to slow down our capacity to start to reopen our economy, is behavior that's inconsistent with the statewide guidelines. So I just want to make that clear up top. And again, just want to thank all the incredible work that was done over the weekend by parks and by our public partners and by large cities that really conducted themselves appropriately and truly did justice to the guidelines that not only they set locally, but that the state of California has set. And we'll have a little work to do to improve upon Saturday in particular, but I'm confident that we can do so. And again, look forward to robust conversations this week in that respect.
All right, you've been listening to California Governor Gavin Newsom, his daily update on the virus, and specifically saying that just weeks, not months away from changing orders in terms of reopening the economy. But you can see his distress, Jason, over the weekend in places like Newport Beach and and other beaches outside of Los Angeles, specifically, he was noting, where people were out and about, and his concerns are how that can lead to a resurgence in the virus, and as a result, will slow the reopening that he's hoping to do. And he's, continuing to think about the specifics and how we get to that reopening. But if the numbers start to go up again, you can't do that.
Have you seen the pictures of Newport Beach?
I saw some pictures over the weekend. Nuts, right?
It's nuts. I mean, it is absolutely nuts. It looks like
nothing's wrong.
Typical summer day, people packed in together, and there was a heat wave. I get it. The beaches are beautiful. And yet, we've all experienced this, I think, either through pictures or in person. There's a big, beautiful state park very close to where I live, and the cars were parked, lined up on streets, folks getting in, and maybe they were practicing social distance once they were in there. And yet you just worry, given everything that we've heard about these big gatherings of people.
Well, I have to say, we went out for a drive on Saturday, got in the car, and I really thought twice about doing it. And then once we got on, my daughter's like, it's like nothing's wrong. Like people were out on the streets Saturday, just out and about. I will say, predominantly everybody had a mask on, but still there were a lot of people out, and it really surprised us.
Yeah, no. So certainly something to watch, especially as we seem to be at this critical moment on the curve. So we'll continue to watch that, and we'll continue to bring you the comments from various governors around the country, especially here in the tri-state area, where a lot of big decisions being made. A lot of big decisions going to be made later this week. A lot of comments made by the Federal Reserve. Let's understand the world of economics right now. Let's go to Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from the Poconos. Yelena Shalecheva, she is Senior U.S. Economist for Bloomberg Economics. She joins us on the phone from Long Island. So, KH, Jay Powell, we're going to hear from him. Exciting.
We sure are. We're going to get their policy decision. They've been meeting a lot and doing a lot of things, but kind of just the regularly scheduled meetings have been sort of an afterthought, right? I mean, things were so dire when the virus started getting worse and people were wondering what was happening and the Treasury market was going crazy. So now we have a regularly scheduled meeting, but they've already set up all these special lending programs. They have already taken the key rate down to about 0. So I'm glad you mentioned Jay Powell in the press conference, because no matter what the policy statement says, it seems likely this is going to be the main stage when Jay Powell gets asked questions by reporters about the economy, about could they do more, about would they go to negative rates, about oil's selling off, all these different questions. And I think probably a lot of good questions about the programs themselves. And, was it a good idea to start getting into the corporate bond market, things like that. But, it's a big deal, but probably not because of any big changes or announcements in terms of programs or the economy, more about what people can dig out of him when he has to face the nation.
Before we got into this and before we heard from the California governor, Charlie Pellet did a news update, and Lara Rain was one of the economists who, a quote from her, and she said, we're getting ready for an epically bad data set this week. So, Yelena, how will that at all kind of affect the tone and tenor of what we hear from Jay Powell and company?
First of all, I agree with all the above that Kathleen said about the press conference. That will be front and center of the policy meeting this week. So the statement will obviously acknowledge that, a record steep decline in economic activity is underway, and, the Fed is doing anything they can to kind of provide a cushion for that. But I agree, a lot of questions will be in terms of what happens next, whether negative rates are possible in the United States. And on that front, we firmly would like to reiterate that policymakers will say absolutely not. It's not one of the tools under their belt. Rather, they will probably extend existing lending facilities, not in a sense that they will introduce the new ones, but rather they will probably extend the existing ones and perhaps go more in terms of a risk tolerance of current programs. They will also probably be asked about other tools they might have. And I am personally interested in something that was quite widely discussed even before the crisis, such as yield curve controls and perhaps any other measures they might be considering. So, and in terms of a potential rebound and but unwinding the measures that they have already introduced. So what will be the timing of those further steps? That is also possible in terms of questions, I believe.
Yeah, and I would expect that the Fed and Jay Powell will be very transparent because that's what the market and investors need. All right, guys, thank you so much. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor at Bloomberg News, along with Yelena Shaletjeva, our Senior U.S. Economist, Bloomberg Economics. They will be following all of this throughout the week, Jason.
All right, and we know he's following all the business headlines for the day. That's Charlie Pellet. Let's head over to him for an update.
And here's what's going on, Jason Kelly. 46 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. We're higher across the board here. The Dow up almost 400 points right now, up 1.7% at 24,170. Stay with Bloomberg right through the closing bell to see if the Dow holds above 24,000. We've got the S&P up 45 now, 2882. That is a gain of 1.6%. NASDAQ higher by 100 points, up by 1.1%. Bottom line, stocks climbing as major economies edge toward reopening. We've got the 10-year now 0.65%, down 19.30 seconds. Gold lower by 0.8%, 17.14 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 22%. All sounds very familiar. WTI now at 13.06 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, Jason, we know the cover story of Business Week magazine last week was all about the reopening of the Chinese city where the virus first started Wuhan. Also writing about Wuhan this week on the Bloomberg New Economy editorial director Andy Brown, who reminds us that when it comes to understanding the virus, Wuhan was the past. It is also the future. Andy joins us on the phone in New Hampshire. By the way, in a conversation, it was picked up by major media outlets around the globe. Last week, in a Bloomberg New Economy series, Andy hosted a conversation virtually with the Chinese ambassador and Australian prime minister. So hopefully we can get into that. They talked about U.S.-China decoupling. Andy, great to have you back with us. Wuhan, let's talk about that because we all are really watching that city very closely.
Right. So this is the epicenter, or was the original epicenter of the, COVID-19 epidemic, which turned into a pandemic, and the city has reopened after a fashion, and right now, Wuhan is a lesson to the world about how you go about reopening. And, there's this sort of easy feeling in the West, in the United States and Europe, that somehow you sort of flip a switch and you go back to life as it was before. And the lesson from Wuhan is that that's just a fantasy. It's a dream. Life in Wuhan is grim. It's a facsimile of life. The sacrifices and the costs of reopening that city are very high, and it means accepting, in Wuhan's case, a degree of intrusion of the state into individual life, which is just unthinkable, in the United States or other democracies. And it's not just Wuhan. It's the experience generally in East Asia opening up is similar. So, Hong Kong, you've got these electronic monitoring bracelets. Taiwan will monitor your cell phone if you're in quarantine. South Korea, will publish vast amounts of data about individuals who are suspected of carrying the virus or who have it, and will publish this nationally in a way which would be sort of outrageous to countries in the West. I guess our story, it was a very good story out of Wuhan, is just sort of it's a kind of a wake-up call. It's saying, you really need to think about what are the consequences and what sacrifices are you ready to make in order to go back to some version of normal life.
Well, because, Andy, it's such an important distinction, too, because I feel like we've gotten our head around, as best we can, inconvenience, right? That like life is going to be different, and maybe we have to wear a mask, or maybe we can't go to certain places, or maybe it's going to be a while before we get to do certain things. But there is a big difference, a big distinction between inconvenience and, as you say, intrusion. you know the world very well. You just gave some really good examples. What's your sense of how Americans and Europeans will deal with some of these measures that you've described?
I don't know. I mean, it's perhaps there is a halfway house. Perhaps there is a sort of an opening light or a sort of a less intrusive way of reopening safely. But I guess the question is that this needs to be there needs to be a debate. I mean, people need to decide what they're ready to accept, the restrictions and the intrusions that they're ready to accept, and where the guardrails are, where the red lines are. And I'm just not seeing that debate.
Right.
But also this sort of just the tenor, the quality of life that I'm not sure people. Our reporting was very vivid out of Wuhan. Our reporters went through factories and discovered these sort of silent, sort of dystopian places where workers are not allowed to talk to each other when they're having lunch in case they inadvertently sort of spread the virus. And the elevators are closed, and the workers have got to walk upstairs. And constant vigilance, sort of hyper awareness of the danger. This sort of, it's this specter of disease that shadows everybody. So you can go to a Starbucks in Wuhan, but if you sit there, you're going to be told by security guards, keep your distance, and they're going to tell you to readjust your face masks after you've taken a sip of coffee, and that's after everybody in China is color coded, right? I mean, so you've got a COVID-19 status. It's green, it's yellow, or it's red, and there's a QR code, there's a barcode for this. You swipe in, so this is having swiped into Starbucks, having revealed your COVID-19 status, you're still treated, as though you're sort of in some kind of a lockup.
Andy, and I think more so than ever before, we need global cooperation. And I do want to touch on your Bloomberg New Economy conversation that you had, I think, over the past week, and just, how that lack of cooperation, global cooperation, is going to prevent the world from healing on so many different levels. And I do wonder, in a society or in Eastern Asia where you can more easily force people to do stuff versus the United States, where everybody is, wait, I have rights to do whatever I want, whether that holds back the Western economies from coming back from this.
For sure. So, I mean, the experience, the historical experience, of course, in disasters is that the United States has taken the lead precisely in order to coordinate this kind of global response, and it signally failed to do so this time. China has this was one of the conclusions of our panel. China has kind of disqualified itself from this role because of the way that it botched the early, there was the cover-up in Wuhan and so on, and then this attempt to use medical diplomacy as an instrument of propaganda, and people don't really trust the numbers coming out of China. So, China hasn't come out of this as a global leader. The conclusion really was that if there is going to be global cooperation, and it is, as you say, utterly and absolutely essential. I mean, people need to get together to figure out therapies and ultimately a vaccine. But if we're going to get that kind of cooperation, it will occur in the absence of leadership from China and the United States. So, Kevin Rudd, the former Australian Prime Minister, has this idea for, I think he calls it a group of M7, a grouping of countries, including a number of countries in Europe, but specifically not including the U.S. and China. And he's proposing that these countries form an alternative committee to save the world, in effect.
That is incredible. And meanwhile, the relations just bilaterally between the U.S. and China feel like they continue to worsen and show no signs of getting any better. And that seemed to be a conclusion of your panel too, Andy.
Right. So there was this sort of hopeful idea that somehow or other, in the face of this existential threat, the United States and China might be able to at least temporarily bury their differences and work together on a cure, on a vaccine, and that doesn't seem to have happened. The Chinese ambassador Cui Tiankai, he said, "Look, we have to re-examine the whole fundamentals of this relationship." There was a general acceptance around at the table of our panel that the relationship has now completely collapsed. And it's bipartisan in the U.S., of course, on the Democrat and the Republican side, with both Trump and seemingly Joe Biden competing with each other now to be tough on China.
To like China less, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is pretty incredible. But as you say, there was that ray of hope. And I read something earlier this afternoon that was talking about how, there seemed to be something of a truce between President Xi and President Trump. And that very quickly broke down at that level, at the highest level, but also at the level underneath both of those leaders. Andy Brown, thank you so much. Editorial Director of Bloomberg New Economy, on the phone from New Hampshire. I want to bring you a quick headline. Toward the end of that, or still in that update from California Governor Gavin Newsom, California reporting 45 virus deaths. That's down from 100 plus, I believe an average of 100 plus last week at daily deaths. So that's good.
That's good. That is positive. Fingers crossed that we continue those numbers, although, as we heard from Governor Newsom, he's a little concerned about some of those images that he saw over the weekend at Newport Beach of people next to one another, doing their things like nothing was wrong. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are extending their gains in the final hour, lifting the market to a 6-week high. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 393, the S&P 500 up 45, the Nasdaq Composite up 101. 1 week after going negative for the first time, oil snapped a 4-day recovery. Crude finished at $12.78 a barrel, down $4.16. The global oil industry is weeks away from seeing storage tanks reach capacity. The FDA is taking aim at vaping products that look like toys and candy. Warnings have gone out to 10 companies whose devices resemble smartwatches, fidget spinners, and more. The FDA says the products help minors hide their vaping from their parents. Vail Mountain Resort says it will offer credits to skiers who bought season passes for this winter's season, which was interrupted by the pandemic. It will also offer protection for next season to encourage pass holders to return to its 37 ski resorts. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the Terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting...
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has ignored a call on purpose? Tick. Talked yourself out of a workout? Tick. Spent far too long scrolling on your phone? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto-renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Typical Danny. Imagine trying to unwind at a spa weekend and you wind up getting your mud pack all over your fave personalised dressing gown. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to National Lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you. Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products, like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Saw those neck rolls.
Yep. Just getting psyched up for the chart of the day. It's all happening.
Yes, it is. I'm excited to see how he's kicking off the week.
He's getting in game shape for Dave Wilson. Got to guess that song. Got to talk about the chart. Got to guess the close of trading.
Pressure's on.
It's all happening.
All right. Let's get a check on your top business stories and an update on the trading day. We've got just about 29 minutes to go, Charlie Pellet.
Indeed, we've got stocks higher across the board with the Dow Jones Industrial Average holding above 24,000 right now. 24,172, up almost 400 points. A gain right now of 1.7% for the Dow, up 399 as I speak. We've got the S&P up 46 at 2883, higher by 1.6%. NASDAQ up 106, that is a gain of 1.2%. Stocks advancing as major economies edge toward reopening. S&P poised for its highest close since March 10th as financial companies lead gains after a surprisingly good earnings report from Deutsche Bank. Its American depository receipts are also advancing today. DB, the ticker there, up by 12.5%. Some of the other stories we're following: global confirmed cases have passed the 3 million mark, even as Italy reports the lowest levels of new coronavirus infections in 7 weeks and prepares to begin reopening. Research is also continuing at a rapid pace as drug developers race to come up with a treatment for coronavirus. Dr. Joshua Sharfstein is Vice Dean of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and on the Bloomberg television this morning, he talked about what's showing promise and what isn't.
Hydroxychloroquine has not been
being shown to work in different studies and may even be dangerous, although the best, most high-quality studies really haven't been published for that. And there's also a whole bunch of studies coming out on remdesivir, which is an antiviral drug, that have yet to come out.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Lenders worldwide have pledged more than $31 billion in loans to major airlines, scrambling to line up funding as the coronavirus pandemic forces them to ground their fleets. Mixed day for a lot of U.S. airline stocks today. For example, UAL up 0.2%, American down 1.7%, Delta up 0.9%, Southwest up by 1.3%. 10-year yield 0.65%, gold down 0.8%, West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 22%, now $13.18 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg. The voice sounds familiar.
As well it should.
Is that, don't tell me. Is that David Lee Roth?
It is.
Oh, well done, Jason Kelly.
There we go. And is that when he was part of Van Halen?
It was.
There you go. Bottoms up, Dave Wilson. Happy Monday.
Exactly.
See, I got all jazzed up for the chart of the day, Carol. See, I was doing my little stretches and exercises.
Is he trying to tell us something bottoms up? Do you think he was
delivered?
Imbibing a little bit over the weekend?
I'm not trying to tell you what you might think, Carol.
I'm just thinking.
I mean,
that's what David Lee Roth
suggestion on that score.
But that's not what
I digress. In any case, no, it's all about, sort of bottom up looking at the stock market and trying to figure out what it's signaling about the economy. It's an exercise that Jim Paulson did the other day. He's the chief investment strategist over at Luthold Group. And among other things, he looked at some of these industry groups that are economically sensitive and that have been beaten up and said, you're starting to see a recovery in the shares, even though if you look at the economic indicators, there hasn't been one yet. And so what do you take away from that? In short, the way he sees it is that, there's some optimism that what the economy is going through right now is going to reach its low point sooner rather than later. That's his take anyway. And in order to show what he was looking at, because, otherwise it would have been too messy a chart, I just looked back at the last 3 weeks for 3 industry groups within the S&P 500. Restaurants, auto stocks, and home builders. And what you find out is in each case, each of these groups were up more than the S&P 500 over that time span. So, you're seeing a recovery in each of them. The best performer out of the 3 was up something like 28%, and that would be the home builders. And the other 2 were up about 20% as well at a time when the S&P 500 was up 14%. So, it's not only that you're seeing a rebound, but you're also seeing something more than just groups participating in the market recovery. So, that's the sort of thing that Paulson's looking at and saying, well, maybe it's not going to get dragged out forever, at least based on what the stock market is telling us and the way he sees it, the information, in essence, that you get out of that, it's a bit more timely than what you'll find elsewhere, looking at economic indicators and so on. So if you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Jason mentioned to Dave, you were looking at the NASDAQ. Yeah.
So, Dave, I'm sure you've noticed this already, and on a big tech week, tech earnings week, the NASDAQ, as of right this moment, if I'm reading my Bloomberg correctly, which I think I am, NASDAQ is only down 2.5% for the year.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at the NASDAQ 100, biggest companies, and those are the ones that everybody's watching out for when it comes to earnings, you look at where the NASDAQ 100 is, it's up for the year, 1.3%, which kind of speaks to the point in a sense. bigger companies kind of leading the way. And that's really been a concern not only in the current bear market, but also in the bull market that preceded it. So, there's a consistency there. And you take a look at either of those indicators relative to what the S&P 500 is doing at this point.
It's down.
It's still down more than 10% for the year.
Yeah. And the Dow's down about 15%, right? So that's pretty dramatic, that difference.
It is. And it shows you how much is at stake, as we start getting all these numbers this week. I mean, it really is going to be perhaps a make or break week in that sense, given just the size of the companies, their importance to the market, starting with Alphabet and working from there, the owner of Google. And, of course, we have the issues about whether these companies are going to be able to maintain the kind of advertising that has really bolstered their business over the years. Snapchat's parent Snap was out with results last week that went over well on that score. But the question is, once you get to, Google and Facebook, do you really see the same picture?
Right. Yeah. Is it as broad-based? Absolutely. All right, Dave Wilson, we'll talk to you in less than 30 minutes' time for your stock of the day. That's, of course, Dave Wilson with his chart of the day. Very proud of myself for that David Lee Roth poll. Just saying.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad you're proud of yourself,
That seems
Jason
sarcastic.
Kelly.
That doesn't seem sincere. Let's get to Bob Moon, always sincere, with our World of National Headlines. Hi, Bob.
I detected no little Jack Horner there at all. Don't bother tuning in for the regular nightly briefing from the White House Coronavirus Task Force. There won't be one this afternoon. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany tells Fox News the task force will resume briefings later in the week. She spoke of these events not as a way to provide important health information to the public, but as a way to spotlight the president.
We're looking at different ways to showcase this president leading. The briefing's a key component of that. We will have briefings this week.
Without exception, Trump has attacked Democrats and reporters and sought to gain political points at all the daily pandemic status briefings after he was widely criticized and ridiculed for promoting his own unorthodox hunches for treating the virus. He decided during the weekend that the briefings had lost their usefulness because the media did everything possible, he said, to disparage them. The Navy hospital docked in Manhattan will depart this week. Bloomberg's Michael Barr reports.
It arrived late last month to help relieve New York City hospitals dealing with COVID-19 cases. Now, barring bad weather, the Navy is planning a Thursday departure for the USNS Comfort. During its time in New York, the medical crew of the Comfort treated 182 patients, the last of which was discharged over the weekend. The workers are now breaking down the coronavirus ward and will then begin 14 days in isolation. Michael Barr, Bloomberg Radio.
And just to clarify on that briefing story, President Trump will hold a press availability today as he meets with chief executives and industry leaders, but the White House Coronavirus Task Force will not be holding a briefing. Global News 24 hours a day on air, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, I'm Bob Moon.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The markets.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GBLD stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip 3, have a game night. In fact, why not make it a game day? Whether you're quarantined with kids or roommates, nothing passes the time like a game of cards, Pictionary, charades, dominoes, or Never Have I Ever. If you've got the hardware, break out the video game console and enjoy hours of guilt-free gaming. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, our writers fan out to report from across the city at the height of the coronavirus outbreak in New York.
I won't say it's business as usual, but, we still have responsibilities and we are handling everything. But, I'm not going to let COVID beat me.
That's the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ at or near session highs. Let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks with a bid again today, with the Dow currently up 416 points. S&P's up 49. NASDAQ climbs by 112. The U.S. 10-year yield at 0.66%. WTI crude futures plunged 23%. Gold is down 15, and small caps rise 4.9%. Transports jumped 269 points, and the VIX is down by 8%. Leaders to the upside in the Dow: Disney, 3M, and J.P. Morgan. Modest losses in Walmart, Procter & Gamble, and Microsoft. In other news, Boeing says they are staying current on payments to suppliers. Also said it will be years before the company's dividends return. And the CEO said he is still confident in the 737 MAX. Wrapping things up, F5 Networks and Keurig Dr. Pepper report after the bell. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg-type squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, just got about 11 minutes left in today's trading session. It is time for the Drive to the Close. Ron Carson is back with us, co-founder, CEO of the wealth advisor Carson Group. They are based in Omaha, Nebraska, and that's exactly where we find Ron on this Monday. Ron, good to have you back with us. How are you doing? Tell us a little bit about life in Omaha right now.
Well, Carol, it's great to be back with you, and my heart goes out to everybody in New York. I know you guys have been hit especially hard. I'm going on. I had 2 knee surgeries leading into this, so I'm week 14 working from home. But I would say the company's functioning well, and then personally, me and my family are doing really well.
Well, I guess that was in part well-timed. I don't know if knee surgery is ever totally well-timed, Ron, but at least it sets you up to be in the right position. What's the general sentiment around, sort of folks that you talk to there in Nebraska? I mean, we're always trying to take the temperature, especially given this, I keep using this term, sort of this checkerboard approach. It feels like that we're going to take state by state in terms of reopening. What's the sense there among your neighbors?
What I like about Omaha and maybe Nebraska in general is we're a bunch of rule followers. So, for the most part, everybody's out. You're walking down the sidewalk. They go clear on the other side of the street. And it's not 50 feet, it's 6 feet. So they're very much observing it, the rules. On the flip side, financially, though, a bit of concern for me is, a major case of FOMO, everybody's fear of missing out, on this reflation that we've had because, people either had cash or raised some cash, during the decline. And I'd say the rule following, but having a lot of time to sit around and go, gosh, I wish I would have put a lot more money in, at the quote unquote, market low that we've had so far.
Yeah, I do wonder if we're going to all look back at this. I mean, Jason and I have had a lot of conversations. I've had these conversations at home that, you knew logically that certain companies were not going to come undone and that things were going to bounce back. It's just a matter of timing. And so for stocks that had run up, just nonstop, all of a sudden share prices were essentially on sale.
They were, and some really good companies. And this is where I think, for quite a run, we've had passive, just buy the market, not have to think about it, has been the place to be. Now it's going to be surgical. It's going to be active because if you go back during the financial crisis, some companies became much stronger. Some companies gained considerable market share. I mean, look at Zoom, look at Amazon, look at these companies that are, actually unfortunately, they benefit from this, tragedy hitting our country. But, the fact is that some of this demand is permanent, but most of the demand is just going to be deferred to a future date. And then other companies are going to pick up the business from those companies that unfortunately aren't going to survive.
And so, Ron, talk to us about oil, because, that's a story that I feel like, again, maybe plays a little bit differently depending on where you are in the country, depending on what your business is and how you rely on it or don't rely on it. We spent so much time, I think, in the past thinking about it vis-a-vis gasoline prices. That seems like less of an issue, although obviously demand plays into the equation here. But how do you think about oil from an investment perspective?
Yeah, that's the number one topic, right? When we had oil, especially had, the May futures trade negative, which I never fathomed I've been in this business nearly 40 years could ever happen. Now everybody's looking around saying this must be the buy of a lifetime, and I wouldn't be so sure. I mean, we've got true, it's beneficial to the consumer because we have lower energy prices. My CIO just told me, he was right back from Chicago, paid $1.18. Here in Omaha, it's about $1.40, a gallon. That's tremendous stimulus, right? At least we're not spending as much, and ultimately that should be a tailwind for the economy. From an investor standpoint, you just saw, Diamond Offshore filed for bankruptcy. There's going to be a lot of other bankruptcies out there, and this is the major question: is who can survive and how long will it be? And this is where you need to be surgical about the companies that you invest in. But I think the June contract, may trade as down as much as the May contract did, especially if oil falls below 10. They increased the margin calls from I think it was either 6 or 6.50 a barrel all the way up to 10. So if we see the contract trade below 13, watch out. And you've heard about we don't have nearly the demand, and so we don't have a lot of places to put this oil, and that's what's causing this downdraft.
Crunch, yeah.
Ron, is it time for all of us to accept that, we went from, when it came to the energy markets, oil specifically, that of course oil is a great investment play. We're, even though we talk about alternative fuels, it's still such a small percentage. And the world is growing, and you have developing economies like China just coming online increasingly. So, we've gone from that to, oh my God, we have just too much of this stuff. And we've got market imbalances. You've got demand destruction as well as too much supply. Have we come to the end of the oil story? Or are we getting closer to it?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Carol. I think we're coming closer. There's a university in Palo Alto called Singularity University, and it's a place where business CEOs around the world can come for a week and learn about, what are some of the trends people aren't talking about. And a year ago, they were talking about the fact that they think there's going to be more than $1 trillion of carbon unused because of the alternative, energy plays that are out there. And I believe that, two things are happening. We've made successfully, we're shifting to these alternative energy sources, which are falling dramatically. And the next generation cares about the amount of emissions we put out far more than any other generation we've had. So they're very, very conscious, willing even to spend a little more. So I think the fact that we saw, oil nearly hit $150 a barrel and then all the way down to a negative number. But I just don't think it's going to be the play in the future that it's been in the past.
And just about 20 seconds here. The Fed, excited, worried about Jay Powell this week?
Not worried at all. I think the Fed's done a masterful job. In 2008, Treasury and the Fed really weren't on top of it. They are this time. The only thing we think is they may expand some of the programs, which would be positive for the economy.
All right. Well, be well. We really appreciate it. Ron Conway out there in Omaha. Good to catch up with you. Good luck with those new knees. And stay safe. Right? Sounds like your neighbors are doing a good job with the social distancing. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Coming up, the close. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coffee or full breakfast? Have it at day.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
While most of us are looking out for each other at this time, sadly, fraudsters are trying to take advantage of the situation. Here's Chris Ainsley from Santander with advice for keeping your money safe.
Please be vigilant for suspicious calls that appear to be from your bank, the police, or the government. Remember, neither Santander, the police, or any other organisation will ask you to move or withdraw money for security reasons.
For more advice on keeping your money safe, visit santander.co.uk.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Right now at the Halifax, wherever we're working from, we're all working together to be there for you.
So our customers can apply for a payment holiday on mortgages, loans or credit cards.
And because we want you to stay home and stay safe.
We've created step-by-step guides to help you set up online and mobile banking.
Which is safer and easier than you may think.
But for those that really need to see us in person, we're keeping as many branches open as possible.
So however you need us at the Halifax,
we're here to help. Terms and conditions apply. For more information, go to halifax.co.uk.
.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange as we wrap up trading on this Monday. That is the folks from the New York Stock Exchange all alone there ringing the closing bell. Kevin Fitzgibbons, Chief Security Officer. Stocks climbed as major economies edged toward reopening. Policymakers in Japan and Europe sought to reduce pressure on credit markets. The dollar weakened. Oil took another dive, a topic we were just talking about. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging today by 23%, down almost $4 a barrel at $12.99. S&P 500 index having its highest close since March 10th as financial companies led gains after a surprisingly good earnings report from Deutsche Bank and amid continued talk of easing the lockdowns that have helped contain the coronavirus. As for where to invest in this market, David Lebovitz is global market strategist at JP Morgan Investment Management.
We don't think it's appropriate at this juncture for clients to run to one side of the boat or the other. We want to focus on companies with low levels of leverage, solid profit margins, but we don't want to completely abandon beta because as this market trends higher, we want to be able to participate. So staying pretty balanced at the current juncture and really focusing on the fundamentals and the microeconomics at the portfolio level.
And this headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service, U.S. COVID-19 cases up 2.3%. That is the slowest pace this month. Boeing says 52% of its shareholders at the company's annual meeting voted to require the company to appoint an independent chairman. In a virtual gathering, its CEO David Calhoun said it will be, quote, years before dividend payments resume. Boeing also says travel won't return to 2019 levels for 2 to 3 years. Boeing shares lower today by 0.4%. UPS going to be using drones to fill prescriptions for residents of the Villages in Florida, one of the country's biggest retirement communities amid the lockdown. UPS shares trading little changed today. Again, recapping, equities higher, S&P up 41, up 1.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet.
Your next move will be your last.
Nobody move a muscle.
Damn, Sippy, you got the move.
And I'm moving on from town to town.
Time is money. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers with Carol Mazur and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, time to take a look at some of the stocks on the move. It's going to be a big week for earnings and, of course, that Fed meeting. So a lot for investors to digest and, of course, an ongoing update on the virus situation around the country. All right, so big picture today. You heard Dave talk about it, Charlie talk about it. Broad-based rally. So 443 names in the S&P 500 higher today, including a lot of retail names. We'll get to that in just a moment. 62 lower. And Jason, if I take a peek at your major industry groups in the S&P 500, there are 11 of them. All of them were up. The worst performer was consumer staples, just up about 0.5% for the day. Top of the pack, financials, up 3.8%. Real estate was up more than 3%. Materials were up 2.8%. So, yes, some enthusiasm. What's interesting, and I think a lot of it has to do with, like you said, you kicked off the show saying green on the screen around the globe. So
all the way down.
Right. Optimism, right?
Yeah.
As we start to think about reopening, taking steps to actually reopen the economy.
Well, and that is why, I mean, you don't have to be the genius to figure this out. That's why your top 4 performers on the S&P today, retail.
I know.
Pretty amazing, right? So you look at Kohl's, PVH, Nordstrom, Gap. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bing, 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 bing.
And these guys have been really beaten up. Understandably, their stores have been shut. People can't go, and so
and they were struggling before, right? Many of them were struggling before. Maybe Kohl's a little less so, but I'm just taking a look at the Gap right now. I mean, the Gap is down 56% this year.
Yeah. Well, think about it. They've lost a month of shopping. And even though people have been doing stuff online, it's not the same. It's not the same of walking into a store. And I do wonder, listening to conversations on our air and throughout the day on Bloomberg Radio, is, what companies make it to the other side, and whether some of those companies that were already in a weak state, particularly in the retail sector, just don't make it through.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I agree with you. We're going to put a lot of that to the CEO of Joann Stores. We're going to catch up with him during our 5 o'clock hour, back half of our 5 o'clock hour. They're obviously doing a lot of work. It's a different sort of story for them because they're doing some work, maybe not making a lot of money on it, but doing some work for frontline workers, really important work, obviously, but their stores are closed and nobody is stopping by to work on a quilt.
Right, and it's different. You go into a store and you go in maybe thinking to buy one thing, and then you buy other things. That's just the way it works. So you mentioned Kohl's was up 17, almost 18%. PVH, home of many brands, up more than 15%. Nordstrom up almost 14%. And as you said, the Gap is up 13%. Still down a lot for the year, but interesting to see those moves. What else you got?
So here's another thing, and Charlie mentioned this, I think, earlier in the broadcast. I'm laughing only because this is not a name that we talked about in any sort of positive way over the last, 2 years.
How many years?
Deutsche Bank.
I know.
Incredible. I mean, Elisa Martinuzzi, actually her column on the Bloomberg, it's one of the most read, says it all. Deutsche Bank enjoys a rare day in the sun. It's still on the ADRs, the American Depository Receipts, it's still a less than $7 stock, but up, let me just get a percentage gain here, and you mentioned the financials earlier, up 12%, better than 12% today.
Perspective, right? Perspective.
Yeah, perspective.
So they had a rare profit, and so it's just kind of interesting. They do warn of a lot of loan defaults, but nonetheless, you're right. This is a company, I feel like in the last couple of years easily, it's just been one thing after another in terms of their problems.
And let's also keep in mind, when you think about who's gotten good reviews from a country perspective in handling the coronavirus. Germany. Angela Merkel. Don't sleep on Merkel. Like she's
talk about resurgence. She's in a resurgence, right? She was planning to retire, right? Done.
And her successor pieced out. AKK.
Pieced out.
Anyway,
that's exactly what they did.
I don't know what's German for pieced out. In any case, taking a look at the VIX volatility, not surprisingly down almost 8%, closing at 33.10. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson.
Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
Hey, Mr. Wilson. Dave Wilson back with us with your stock of the day. What you looking at?
CNX Resources, Jason. They produce natural gas from shale fields in the eastern U.S. along with methane from coal beds in their home state of Pennsylvania. Now, CNX used to belong to a coal producer, Consol Energy. The businesses went their separate ways in late 2017, thanks to a spinoff. The coal business kept the Consol name, while the gas business kept the ticker. CNX. Now, shares of CNX set a post-spinoff low 7 weeks ago when they were down 52% for the year. Since then, they've rallied far enough to become the best-performing energy company in S&P's benchmark U.S. indexes. We're talking the S&P 500, mid-cap 400, small-cap 600. I mean, natural gas is stabilized at a time when crude oil, well, it's just been tumbling. And CNX's rebound gained momentum after first quarter results came out today. Profit before accounting charges was more than triple analysts' average estimate, the Bloomberg survey. Revenue topped the average projection, and the company laid out a 7-year plan to increase cash flow, even with production cuts this year. All this left CNX's shares to their highest price in about 15 months. They closed with a gain of more than 12%, and for the year, they're up almost 46%.
Yeah, that's a big pop, man.
Yeah.
Big pop for any stock, especially for an energy stock. But the focus has really been on the gas business. And companies like this, Cabot Oil and Gas is another example. I mean, even though they have oil in the name, it's really a gas company.
But I thought we have a glut, too, when it comes to nat gas as well.
Well, that may well be true, but you haven't seen prices fall out of bed the way that you have with oil. And that makes all the difference in the world for these stocks.
Well, and I
but
feel like... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, just as you say, sort of amazing given that Ron Conroy was talking about energy names going bankrupt.
Yeah, I think if we let the markets kind of do their thing, there's going to be some natural selection, no doubt about it. And we know nat gas year after year has seen a lot of pressure also, right? So maybe some of that fluff and excess is already out of the prices. All right, Dave Wilson, always love checking in with you. Dave Wilson with his stock of the day. Let's get back to World and National News.
Let's do it. Ed Baxter is there while, Carol Massar quotes, it sounds like Adam Smith, invisible hand of the market, Ed.
That economics degree, Ed, occasionally comes in handy.
Sometimes it creeps up. It creeps up, Ed.
Sounded good. The functionality of the Trump White House is getting attention today, guys, as the decision on whether or not to have briefings brings some mixed messages. Over the weekend, the president tweeted the task force briefings are useless. Early today, his press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, said there'd be no media meetings. And then...
Today, we're not tracking a briefing. There will be a press avail later this afternoon with CEOs that the president's meeting with. There will be briefings throughout other portions of the week, but these briefings are excellent. They're a way for the president to speak directly to the American people.
So the latest sum total is a media availability at the top of the hour. And she says to show that the president is leading. This is the White House pivots away from scientific briefings for the president to economic. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says some parts of the state may unpause after May 15th.
We're going to turn the valve on reopening, turn it a little bit, start to reopen, and then you watch the dials.
So he says trace monitoring the theme in California as Governor Gavin Newsom expressed concern over several people spotted on Southern California beaches.
Weeks, not months, if the data continues to be as stable as it has been over the course of the last few weeks. The only thing that can stop that is more images like we saw over this weekend.
And those images were people flocking to the beach. In San Francisco, I'm Ed.
The markets. No, you can't just run screaming from the room.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
But you don't have to manage this alone.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
What is your early read as to the scope and scale of this plan?
Bloomberg Markets. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
The world's financial...
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
Typical Danny. Last night I was chilling with my girls, but ended up spilling my Chardonnay all over my fave lilac nightie when I saw the photo I was tagged in. State of my fake tan. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Introducing the new single, Impossible. From Central American rock and blues trio, Steady Rolling. Their epic story of love and loss continues. Download and stream the single, Impossible, from the band Steady Rolling, wherever good music lives.
This is an important message from the government. For now, we must all still stay at home. It can be hard, but it's making a difference. So please keep going for the ones you love. Keep going for every key worker on the front line as they keep going for us. Keep going because together we will beat the virus. To all of you making sacrifices every day, thank you. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to national lottery players, communities across the country are about to benefit from up to £300 million of funding.
Thank you. Thank you.
Money that will help support the most vulnerable in these exceptional times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Food banks, local health organisations, charities combating loneliness, and thousands of other community causes will all get vital resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's all thanks to you, playing the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
What do you do to be an everyday superhero, like Mary?
So I know it's tempting to pour used cooking oil straight down the sink, but I spoke to the local council and they said the best way to get rid of oil or fat is to collect it, once it's cooled down, of course, in a used container. And then you can scoop it out and put it in the bin.
Cooking oils and fats block thousands of pipes every year. Save our sewers, rivers and seas by putting them in the bin, where they belong. Visit thameswater.co.uk/bin it. Together, we can care for the environment.
At Tesco, we've price-matched Aldi on hundreds of products, like bananas, peppers, chicken breasts, mushrooms, Warburton's bread, strawberries, even avocados. That's Tesco products at Aldi prices. Because now more than ever, every little helps. Tesco. Prices checked on comparable products from GB Aldi stores and online twice weekly. Price most often found matched excluding promotions. Selected Tesco stores excluding Express and all Northern Ireland stores. Products and their availability vary weekly and by store. Details at tesco.com/Aldi price match.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King Podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 6-week high for the U.S. stock market. Oil sinks. We've got the S&P up 41 points, higher by 1.5% at 2878. Dow Jones Industrial Average closing above 24,000, up 358 points this Monday, also up by 1.5%. Nasdaq up 95. That was a gain of 1.1%. S&P now at its highest close since March 10th. It was financial companies that led the way higher. The 10-year down 18/30 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. Gold down 0.9%, down $14 the ounce at $17.14. Crude, a major story. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging today by 23%, down $3.96 a barrel, now at $12.98. Recapping equities surge, S&P up 41, up 1.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, let's head to the nation's capital now. Katya Dmitrieva is there with us, U.S. economy reporter, tracking a story that has been captivating us, and we know a lot of the country, which is the loans to small businesses, especially. That program that was approved, re-upped by Congress last week, signed by the president. How is the money flowing? We're starting to get a sense of that, or is it not flowing? Katya joining us to break it all down. So tell us what's happening here.
Yeah, you're right. This has been an extremely interesting story as it develops, because this entire program, the PPP program as it's known, and it's being run by the government through banks, it's really set up as the main tool that's going to protect workers and keep people from being laid off and keep those paychecks intact, and simply hasn't really had a good chance to do that. I mean, the rollout of it was slow, and then now the story that was just out today is based on some new economic analysis, and that's from MIT, Chicago's Booth School, and also NBER. And these economists looked at exactly where the money was flowing, which regions in the U.S., and then they correlated that with the number of banks that were present, the number of branches in each area. And the main finding was that this funding, which was intended to help companies deal with coronavirus closures and issues, they didn't actually go to the places that most needed it. So the regions in the U.S. that most needed this funding, only about 15% of companies, that's 15% of companies in those regions actually got the funding. And then it was about double that, so 30% for companies in regions that actually weren't that impacted.
So, Katya, so you're saying it's a geographic thing, or are you saying it's an industry thing?
It's geographic. So they broke it down, and it might actually help to take a step back and look at how they did this. So they took two sets of data. They took data from SBA, which is the government arm that actually ran the program, and then they also correlated it with some data from Homebase. A lot of the government data we get that comes out, it's really backward looking. So, we have the jobs report for April that doesn't come out for another, week or so. And a lot of other government data is quite similar. So they use this private company that represents a lot of small businesses. And so that's how they found that. And then they, did a spreadsheet. They lined up the two columns to find which parts of the U.S. had the biggest drops in hours worked. And then as well, the most closures. So the greatest share of businesses that were closed. And then those two components became, which states with which congressional districts were the hardest hit. And it really varies across the U.S. They have a map in the report, which is linked in our story that you can check out. And it really varies. There's hot spots across every single state and across the country. There's no real one state that really sticks out. It's just by congressional district.
All right. Well, it's terrific reporting. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. But check out Katja's story and her ongoing coverage of this. This is the most important story, I think, that's out there right now, Carol, because as Katja said it very well, this ultimately is going to determine whether this rescue works or not. If this money doesn't flow to the right places, it doesn't work. Like the whole thing's sort of for naught in some ways, all the back and forth politically.
And we talk about the importance of small business to our economy. It's crucial. I'm going to put this story out on Twitter. In the meantime, we do want to go to Connecticut. The governor there, Ned Lamont, giving an update on the virus in his state. Let's listen in.
Because that is all part of our reopening strategy, and so important to being able to isolate anybody who has been infected and who they were in contact with. Later in the week, then we're going to have our Reopen Connecticut team, Indra and the good doctor. And there we're going to start laying out a strategy between now and May 20th and then after May 20th and what we can open on a very methodical basis. And then finally on Friday, we've got our end of the month numbers that show you where we are for the end of this fiscal year, which ends June 30, and then the next fiscal year. And to be blunt, while the numbers are not very pretty, we look pretty good compared to a lot of our peers. So we'll go into that in some detail with Melissa McCaw. Just a couple of things that came to mind as I keep looking over at Asia to see what the heck's going on, what we can expect. It's sort of the tale of two cities over there. You've got places like Hong Kong and Singapore where they have a small resurgence going on again. And we wanted to make sure that does not happen here in Connecticut. But one of the reasons is Hong Kong has a lot of flights going in and out. Singapore has migrant labor in and out. So it just reminds you over in this part of the world, to the degree to which we can slow up a lot of travel, it'll make a difference for the long term. And the good news is over in New Zealand and Australia, where if you saw, they are slowly, through strict social distancing, bringing the infection rate to zero. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel if we focus on what we've got to do and what we've got to do appropriately. Supply chain, I just got off the phone with all our fellow governors and the White House task force. As I implied, it's sort of interesting what's going on in different parts of the country. Talking about supply chain, remember back in the 70s when we realized we're terribly dependent upon oil, mainly Middle East oil and OPEC, and what that meant in terms of those long lines at the gas station. And we've worked on our energy independence now 40 years later. We're much better off than we were before. But it was just interesting hearing from some states like North Dakota and Wyoming, for example, where they have very low COVID infection-related rates, but they get half their budget from taxes on gas, taxes on natural gas and coal. And there, they've seen their revenues disappear by 30-40%. So it's worth remembering how this pandemic affects different states in different ways. Speaking of, again, the supply chain, I think we have learned as a country how important control over our own destiny was, just like OPEC reminded us how important it was for energy independence back during the 1970s. I mean, we've obviously found out the hard way when it comes to protective gear, when it comes to gowns, when it comes to masks. Josh and I spent a lot of time, waiting for the plane to land from China. And we realize that going forward, this is something in our supply chain we want to get more control over. Antibiotics are the same way. I mean, most of the antibiotics come from overseas. Generally, ingredients that come from China, often processed the antibiotics in India. And India put a hold on, exporting antibiotics for a while because they had their own pandemic. Again, when you think of PPE, you think of antibiotics. These are things in our supply chain that we'd like to get control over ourselves. And that brings us to food. And you probably remember from the last couple weeks the tragedy of all those cars lined up at Rentschler Field, desperate to get just a few days' worth of groceries. At the same time, you saw farmers around the country, getting rid of milk and, about what's going on in our poultry and our chicken and our meat processing plants. Tyson Foods just did an ad today. You maybe saw it in some of the big newspapers saying, watch out, we could have some interruptions in our food supply. So with that in mind, over the last week or so, we've been meeting with, talking with Brian and Deirdre about how we can get control over our own food supply. And I know we don't make most of what we eat here in the state, but let's do a better job of aggregating what we can and keep that food supply going so we don't have any farmers or dairy pouring milk away while people are lined up. And that's what Brian Herbert's going to be doing for us. As you know, Brian, he's our Commissioner of Agriculture, does an extraordinary job there, very close with the farmers. And so it's in that capacity that I thought he was the ideal person to help lead our effort when it comes to consolidating our food supply chain from the farmers, be it dairy and then produce over time, right down to food share and food bank and the people who are getting that distributed. And then Deirdre will talk a little bit more on the other side of the equation because we have SNAP, which is, the food support program we get from the federal government, in ways perhaps we can use the restaurants as part of our distribution system to get prepared meals to seniors who really won't be able to leave their homes for a while, at least not be able to do it as safely as we would want. So, Brian, what are your thoughts about how we can shore up our food supply chain here in the state of Connecticut and what that means for folks who are looking forward to being counted on a meal?
All right, you have been hearing some comments from Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont talking a little bit about reopening, talking more at the end there, Carol, about the food supply, the supply chain, and that is becoming an issue. It's one of the most read stories in the Bloomberg today, actually, is about the supply of meat and sort of how that is flowing. We talked about this weekend a little bit too, and saw a lot of trucks, and I was thinking a lot about that whole infrastructure that is having to work and really is strained.
I was having a conversation too with some folks at Bloomberg too about the food supply, and I really think we're looking at it a second time about how vulnerable it could be too. And so far things have gone well, but it looks like there are certainly some stress points in it, so something to think about. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Jason Kelly, and let's get a check on some of your top business stories and look at the news after the close. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there. You guys talking about meat and the supply chain. Tyson Foods, for example. Tyson up today by 1.2%, 59.68 on shares of TS, and that is Tyson. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing today as major economies move toward reopening, and policymakers in Japan and Europe sought to reduce pressure on credit markets. The dollar weekend, oil took another dive today. West Texas Intermediate crude plunging 23.8%, now at $12.91 a barrel. Oil fell after the biggest oil ETF said it would sell out of its June WTI futures position as physical oil storage levels continue to balloon. Stephen Shork is the president of the Shork Group, and on Bloomberg Radio this morning, he told us he can't believe that oil is as high as it is.
I'm still asking myself, why is oil that expensive? Obviously, there is no demand. The economy is dead. We're not in a recession. We're in a Great Depression. It's bad, and it's only getting worse from here. So that said, there is a reason why oil is probably once again going back to zero.
And again, the USO, that is the oil equity ETF, its shares dropping today by 14.7%, now at 219 on USO. Among some of the oil majors, an up day. ExxonMobil up by 0.5%, Chevron up 3.1%, ConocoPhillips advancing today by 2.9%. 10-year yield 0.65%, gold down 0.8%. Again, recapping on equities, S&P up 41, up 1.5%. The Dow up 358, also up 1.5%. Nasdaq up 95, a gain of 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Just a quick headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. The Fed expanding its municipal facility to smaller counties and cities. So this has to do with, as we know, cities and states around the country, especially those hardest hit by the virus, they are finding fiscal strain as a result of this, and they're pressing for some assistance from the government, not necessarily getting it and getting pushback so far. And so the Fed, once again, kind of coming in and helping out.
Yeah, interesting to see the Fed step in there, especially in light of what we've seen, as you say, more politically. This has been a massive political football between the Democrats and the Republicans down in Washington. So Jay Powell stepping in to maybe provide some relief. So let's get into a level of detail that is really important as we think about reopening. You know, we hear the pronouncements from the governors. We just heard a little bit from Governor Ned Lamont of Connecticut. We heard earlier in the day from Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, Phil Murphy from New Jersey, Gavin Newsom from California. They're all talking about the same things, and yet all of us, just as individuals, as Carol Masser would say, we're thinking, well, what does it actually look like when I go back to my office building, especially if I work in Manhattan, which, by the way, both of us do. So this is a story that has a little bit of a personal edge. Michelle Davis joins us, finance reporter for Bloomberg. I have to say, she has been one of the hardest working journalists across the Bloomberg empire during all of this, in part because everybody wants to know what's happening next on Wall Street. She has some of the answers in a piece today with Jenny Serrain. Michelle, tell us what you found. It all comes down in some ways to things as basic as elevators.
Exactly. So, you know, what we found is that while, as you mentioned, you know, government officials, CEOs, everyone is talking about reopening, there are a lot of questions about what that's exactly going to look like. And one of the simplest things is, like, what do you need to do to make sure workers are actually comfortable going into the office, even if they've gotten, you know, the companies have gotten the green light from health officials and government officials to let people in. And one of the simplest parts of that is what to do about spaces where workers congregate. And, you know, probably the biggest example of that is elevators. We all know that when you go into an elevator, it's a very contained space. And so banks are sitting there trying to think about how they're going to change, you know, the way they get workers up and down these huge skyscrapers. At JP Morgan, they're thinking about stationing attendants outside of the elevators to help push buttons for people so that, you know, there are fewer people actually touching the keypad. Goldman is thinking about maybe, you know, setting out towelettes so that people can use that to handle bread. And
it's like a cruise ship. It's like a cruise ship.
Yeah. Citi has said that, you know, they might actually, whatever they do, they might actually be slower to return people to work than some other companies and that government officials recommend, because they have looked at what has happened in other parts of the world where they have workers like in Asia, and they just want to be sure, you know, that people are comfortable returning.
Well, and I do wonder, Jason, and I've thought about this too, Michelle, you know, the whole idea of how much mass transportation happens in the New York metro area, right? Of people commuting to the city, and not everybody can drive. You don't want to drive because the traffic is horrendous. So people, you know, millions of people getting on mass transportation every day. Like, how do we figure that out? And that's true of Wall Street and pretty much everybody going in and out of going in and out of the city, Michelle.
Exactly. And I think one of the things I noticed when reporting this is that there still aren't really that many answers to a lot of these questions, like what to do about like dining halls, or what to do about, you know, the elevators. There are solutions out there, or like possible solutions that are being talked about that seem feasible, but on the transport thing. That seems like one of the biggest hurdles that companies are really struggling to address, because if you think about a place like New York, as you mentioned, people are very dependent on mass transit. And so, we understand that some of these companies are thinking about potentially hiring shuttle services. It's a lot to think about, but it's still very unclear how it's all going to shake out and what they're going to do to resolve some of these question marks.
Well, and Michelle, you and the team have done some really nice work along this about talking on a couple of things. I mean, one is when you talk about Wall Street, it sort of depends on what your job is, right? In terms of where you need to be, when you need to be there, the time frame, how much you can shift, how much you can work from home. It also comes down to the expectations that are set by your company, but also individual managers. There's a human element to this that's really important to remember, especially when we think about the sort of agro Wall Street that we've all come to know over the past several decades.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think a lot of it will come down to your managers and your CEO. Like if those people are showing up to work, then people are going to feel more pressure to do that as well. If companies, take a more hands-off approach and say, we invite you to come back, but you don't have to, maybe that will make people more comfortable. Still a lot of unanswered questions. What
there's
we do
so much
know for sure is
modeling, right? I mean, there's so much modeling that sort of from a leadership perspective that goes on here. There was a story in the New York Times today about Condé Nast. I don't know if you guys saw it, about Anna Wintour, sort of taking a different approach from other people and, taking a very sort of post 9/11 approach, which was you show up, you set an example. This is a different type of crisis in many ways. That's obvious to say, but in terms of the aftermath, the coming back, it's very different, Michelle, and it'll be interesting to see how Wall Street deals with it.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think I think of the conversation we had with Ron O'Hanley, CEO over State Street.
Yeah.
As they were coming back, they thought about it, invited a group, right? They thought about it logistically.
In Asia, when they were bringing their folks back in Asia, yeah.
Right, and it was up to individuals, employees, whether or not they wanted to come back. And what he said is as more people came back and it was okay and safe, it encouraged others to come back. And I do think that will be the approach. It's interesting, I think that will be the approach by a lot of companies. And I think companies are going to do it on their own time frame in terms of despite what mayors may say or what governors may say.
Well, and Michelle, and you know this better than we do. I mean, each of these banks sort of has their personality and their own leadership. You even said, it sounds like, Michael Corey over at Citi is saying that, maybe their time frame is going to be a little bit different.
Exactly. And I think JP Morgan has said that they will follow officials' directives to get people back ASAP. So it is definitely different. One thing we didn't touch on here that I think is just interesting to think about going forward is that a lot of people have talked about how this, working from home has showed us that maybe we can do a lot more at home than we used to be able to, and how maybe that has implications for like the real estate market going forward, where companies might realize they don't need as much office space in the long term as they have more people working remote. But one thing that we learned just reporting this story is that in the short term, it seems like companies might actually need more real estate because if they're going to be spacing people out, and they need to have as many employees, and if people need to be spaced out 6 feet apart or something, and they were already elbow to elbow, that's not going to work in the same building that they're already, in.
And so much for that open environment, right?
Yeah, it's such a great point. We're back to the world of tiny offices and people jockeying for a little bit more square footage. All right, Michelle Davis, great reporting as always, finance reporter for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from Vermont. Let's head out to San Francisco. A lot of distance between him and us. It's Ed Baxter. Hi.
Yeah, but not as friends.
What?
Got to keep it in perspective, right? As the Trump White House pivots from the president talking about science to the economy, there will be a media briefing today after all.
We're looking at different ways to showcase this president leading. The briefing's a key component of that. We will have briefings this week.
Yeah, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany saying the top of the hour now is a schedule. The president also tweeted today a question of why the federal government should provide financial assistance to Democrat-run states. USA Today poll now that Donald Trump is losing support from independent voters from 45% to 27% since December. Overall, Joe Biden leads now 44 to 38%. New York has canceled its June 23rd presidential primary, but Governor Andrew Cuomo says he's extending the stay-home order, but eyeing a phased opening in parts of the state soon.
In some parts of the state, some regions, you could make the case that we should unpause on May 15th. But you have to be smart about it. We all have to be smart about it.
And same theme in California. Governor Gavin Newsom scolded some people who flocked to Southern California beaches over the weekend.
Those images are an example of what not to see. People, what not to do if we're going to make the meaningful progress that we've made in the last few weeks extend into the next number of weeks.
He says statistics show some very positive news, but could be ruined by people breaking the stay away restrictions. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion or your race or because you have children or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
If knowledge is power.
This is a message from the government to all essential workers. You're doing vital jobs to keep our country going, and you can now get tested for coronavirus. From health professionals to emergency services, from delivery drivers to grocery workers, from teachers to care workers. Tests are available for you and anyone in your household who has symptoms. For a full list of all essential workers eligible and how to get a test, go to gov.uk/coronavirus.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it.